A few times in some of the other videos, I've touched on the theological myth sort of theme that you see in a lot of science fiction, a lot of literature, particularly the story of Prometheus and Zeus, and also even the Adam and Eve story, because that ties into, I think, a similar kind of theme, and I think the way that it plays out in modern psychology and the way that people approach art and literature, and sort of the dumbing down, the kind of the degradation of our culture nowadays, and in America and presumably many everywhere else, but America seems to be mostly what I'm familiar with in terms of a lot of these problems, but the way that these tie in, I think, is one example. I remember I've been watching a few videos on not only the war on beauty, as I've discussed. Julie James Davis is the content creator of that channel that talks about the war on beauty and art and literature. But also there's another channel, I wish I could remember the name of it, but where the content creator of this channel talks about the dumbing down of literature, which I've discussed before, and one claim that has become very common among many people, which is that big words are ableist, which I don't really understand, because again, this, as I mentioned, this ties into the kind of oversimplification, the kind of banality of language that's become, and the retardation, really. But the reason why I think that this ties into some of the themes that you see in many dystopias, and particularly, I'll talk about the Adam and Eve theme, about God, of course, not wanting Eve to eat the apple and gain knowledge and gain power and gain, ultimately, intellectual independence. So that's the obvious part of it. But another little twist I notice is that many of us, when we imagine, someone rebelling against their master, rebelling against the elite, the stereotype that we have in our heads, and we see this examples of this in Catcher in the Rye, whatever, is the elite having the perfect command of the English language, almost glib. Living in these beautiful, castles with, using all kinds of big words to communicate, to express themselves. But the person rebelling against that, in the lower orders, is someone who deliberately is not only is more rugged, they might deliberately speak in a language that is less sophisticated, and we've seen examples of this to try to counteract a lot of the shallowness that you see in elite society. So they wear a kind of a rougher image, and it becomes a sort of a badge of honor. But what we're seeing nowadays, however, is that the tables are turning, or actually not the tables are turning. A better way to put it is that in reality, the real rebels in this case, who actually want to be more articulate or bring or revive older traditions when it comes to the use of language, that's becoming, I think, the true form of rebellion. In the same way that when Eve ate the apple, gaining that knowledge or wanting to measure up to God was the ultimate threat. That in other words, in that story in Adam and Eve is not about a character like Eve descending into nihilism and retardation. It's really about her wanting to ultimately become an equal, or almost an equal, to God. And you see a similar theme in the Prometheus story. Obviously, it's a little bit different, because in this case it's more practical. It's about serving the masses, the common people, through basically giving back to them what the elite took away from them. But still, again, this ties into the same problem, and so in other words, in essence, it's no longer really about the kind of it's more complicated than just the rugged loner rebelling against the powers above him. That there's a more it is a little bit more like the theological myth.